a bit of time for people to start their assignment and get themselves moving along. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I will go through the assignment in a bit of detail just to make sure everyone's quite clear. There's, I suppose, a couple different avenues that you can take. If you're within Victoria, it might look different to those in other states, but we'll have a chat about that at the end. Right now, though, we will get stuck into our content for today, which is all about roundabouts. So before we discussed intersections and more like traditional signalized intersections, cyclists at roundabouts are something of a pretty significant concern, though, and something that has been acknowledged, for several years now, that roundabouts do a really wonderful job for general traffic, manages their speed. It reduces the angle of the conflict for vehicles. So if they're going to be colliding, rather than at a T intersection where it's 90 degrees, it's more at that acute angle where they can glance off each other and help reduce the kinetic energy involved within those crashes. So it's really positive for general traffic. Unfortunately, those on a bicycle and even pedestrians do not have the same level of safety benefit. So it's often not a safe option for cyclists. However, we will go through some options to help mitigate the risks associated with roundabouts and hopefully improve the level of safety for cyclists. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the previous 360-degree video where we showed two different intersection examples. So the first example was riding through the protected intersection in Melbourne. And example 2 was using a hook turn to do a right turn movement at just a traditional intersection. So love to hear if you've got any feedback on that one. Our agenda for today will be going through protected roundabouts. So similar to the idea of protected intersections, we've got protected roundabouts. We'll go through the design aspects of that. Once again, we'll have a look at some international examples as well as Melbourne's protected roundabouts. We'll have a chat around multi-lane roundabouts, which are a big concern for safety for cyclists, and then also think about more local roundabouts and how we can manage risks there. Really useful document within this space is something that was produced few years ago now, but the guidance on bicycle and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts produced by VicRoads at the time, or Department of Transport and Planning, still got lots of relevant content in there. And Austroads as well similarly produced a research report, Bicycle Safety at Roundabouts. And I think I touched on this in the last module, but if there's an organization that is producing a report and investing in all this research to conduct new information on a particular topic, such as bicycle safety at roundabouts, it kind of speaks to the prevalence of the issue or how important it is for that. So the fact that they've got a specific report on cyclist safety at roundabouts is indicative of the level of risk that this poses. Alrighty, protected roundabouts. Ken, did you want to jump in there? So I look like you were about to ask a question.
I was pondering whether we'd sort of cover. I mean, Jason jumped in there early with some detailed question, which I very much like because I love a roundabout design. He's asking. He made the point of radial or tangential roundabouts, and I don't think we cover that in this module in terms of sort of fundamentals of roundabout design and what types there are and why we do them and those sort of things. I mean, that's a whole 4 modules in its own right. So we won't get into that detail, but there are very significant differences in roundabout designs from multi-lane roundabouts, single-lane roundabouts, and then radial or tangential, basically being radial sort of you go into the roundabout and then you sort of turn around it, versus the tangential, which gives you a nice tangent flow around the roundabout, and often come with much higher speeds and trying to keep higher flow capacity through. Europeans are very much down the radial roundabout path, which slows vehicles significantly and has some advantages. yeah, so I suppose my point was to say that we're not going to probably go into excessive detail around those bits. We're going to be looking at lots of roundabouts with different cycling facilities and how they've been done. But I think there are some good, points around you can design roundabouts slightly better overall in some circumstances. Interestingly, when you practically try to put radial roundabouts in some situations, it can be quite hard with our vehicle fleet, just for the swept paths and the larger vehicles. Just something to be aware of. But anyway, I'm going to stop there on roundabout
I
design.
forgot about your passion for roundabouts.
Actually, let me just grab something. Sorry, I got my roundabouts of the world calendar. It's going to disappear.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was
outside your office window. You've got like a beautiful aerial view of another roundabout working in action.
Yeah. Well, I'm a paid up member of the Roundabout Appreciation Society of the UK, which is something I don't tell too many people. Anyway, sorry, Max. I have derailed you completely. Carry on.
That's okay.
Tell us about protected roundabouts.
So a protected roundabout has several wonderful functions, but this is an aerial graphic illustration of the one that is now installed within Melbourne. And what you may have noticed is the cyclists are not using the circulating area of the roundabout. Instead, they are provided this kind of off-road path that goes around. We'll go into a lot more detail. I just wanted to provide this first little snapshot so you've got an understanding of what a protected roundabout is, but we'll chat more about the details of this design throughout today. First, wanted to launch a poll, please, Marissa, though. And in this slide, we have got 3 cyclists. We've got cyclist A. There we go. We've got cyclist B. And we've got cyclist C. And the question that we've got is, which cyclist do you believe is most at risk? Now, this is cyclists at a roundabout. Which one do you think is most at risk? A, B, or C? Is that roundabout calendar as part of the prizes there, Ken?
No, it's not. It's not a bad idea though. We could get ourselves a big stock of them and send them out. No, I think slightly more practical prizes might be coming out. We're having a good few people getting their thoughts in around A, B, or C. I think some people wanted to guess more than one there, so pondering it. But and yes, if you're not seeing a poll come up on your screen, feel free to pop it in the chat or in the Q&A just to get involved. Liam's gone with D, so has some other ideas.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes, no, interesting question. And I saw somebody else early on said that they had been struck while riding through a roundabout. I also have. I had a pretty decent crash in a roundabout riding through.
I didn't know that.
There's one on Stevenson Street, straight down from the Vic Roads office. If you're heading towards, the Burnley Street Bridge, and there's that roundabout in the middle there, and just
that's a shocker.
Happily rode into it, and the car coming up from the side continued through in not that dissimilar to what you have on screen.
So failure to give way?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, Ken, I didn't know that. There you go. And you're still on the saddle though. Didn't deter you.
Yeah, and when I sort of got up, I gave the driver my business card, which said Vic Roads Senior Road Safety Engineer. We had a laugh at it as I picked gravel out of my shoulder.
All right, we might end the poll there and we'll share it with our colleagues joined today, Ken.
Okay.
And it is good to see that we do actually have a bit of a split, which is not uncommon for this poll question. So cyclist A, the reason you may have selected that is because this yellow vehicle is kind of focused on oncoming traffic or anyone already within the circulating area and not necessarily looking directly in front of them. Their head is faced to the right. If they can see that this blue, dark blue color vehicle is already heading out, they may just be like, oh yeah, I've got a gap then, I can just head on straight through. And that's when cyclist A could be struck. Cyclist B, as you can see, is in a spot where the sight lines are just not really focused on that particular cyclist. They're in this hidden zone, and it looks like that dark blue vehicle has already entered the roundabout where B is about to strike into them. So B, I certainly agree with that. And C, for that same kind of reason as A, this yellow vehicle is unable to see C, because that dark blue vehicle blocks the sight lines of C. So once again, it could be that assumption that the yellow vehicle sees the dark blue vehicle entering the roundabout and just like, yep, I'm good to go. But the dark blue vehicle may decide to stop at the last second. The yellow's already entered, and that's when you can have that type of collision. So I actually think we might give a prize out to whoever said D, because I'm assuming D meant all of the above. So a bit of a trick question, but it's basically cyclists, no matter where they're situated within this roundabout, in this example, they are at risk.
Okay, so well, prize for Liam, but I think there's a few people who wanted to go down the same line.
True.
But it is, I think, it's a reasonable description there that each has their risk, and yeah, it shows how all these risks come into play. Good. Somebody also had popped into the chat. Chris had asked about protected roundabouts and the percentage of cyclists using the traffic lane or still using the traffic lane. I know you're going to cover that a little bit, so we'll leave it. But I did put in a link to the paper, the research paper we did on that. So,
you're giving away spoilers, Ken, but that's okay. I will cover
that. Okay.
So regarding the statistics that we started with at the top and how different crashes may occur, I suppose this is a little bit of an insight what type of crashes are occurring within roundabouts specifically for cyclists. So we've got 68% here, which is an entering motor vehicle. So that is the red arrow there, colliding with a circulating cyclist. So that is the failure to give way, the crash that Ken just mentioned before, where a cyclist is already in the roundabout and a motorist just heads straight through and there's the collision. That accounts for about 68% at roundabouts. Where a cyclist is crossing as a pedestrian, that's about 8%. The reason you may have that is a vehicle as they're exiting, that's when they've got their foot on their accelerator, they're expecting to pick up speed and they're not necessarily thinking about, having a look or expecting to see a cyclist there. And also a cyclist that is crossing there may have very limited sight lines of seeing a motorist that's about to enter that leg. So there's that kind of awkwardness as well. This one always catches me by surprise, but the exiting motor vehicle versus the circulating cyclist. So in other words, if you're a cyclist and you're already in the roundabout in the circulating area and there's a motorist that wants to leave the roundabout, they want to take the exit leg. To me, I'm certainly most nervous about that collision, but once again, you need to think about statistics and not just judge everything on your own personal experience. But that's one where I'm certainly riding quite white-knuckled. But it counts for about 9% of crashes within roundabouts. Sideswipe within the roundabout itself, so that can be motorists either overtaking within the circulating area or not giving enough space to cyclists, and some just other types that occur as well, bit accounted for 5%. But the most common by far is this entering motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. Now, I will go back into the topic of protected roundabouts. Some of us have this idea of this is what a protected roundabout is. And whilst this is a wonderful thing, this is the Hovenring in the Netherlands, and it uses grade separation. So cyclists don't have to deal with any of these motorway traffic or anything like that. They've got their own beautiful grade separated facility that kind of floats above. Here's just another image of that. This isn't an example of a protected roundabout. I kind of just wanted to show that this is, if you can do grade separation, particularly with, you know, high volumes of high-speed traffic, you should certainly be investigating that. But protected roundabouts are more keeping things at grade. So once again, similar to how we ran through our protected intersections, I'll do a similar analysis of how protected roundabouts are designed, or the design elements of them. So first thing, as previously mentioned, we are not encouraging cyclists to use the circulating area. Instead, they have their own off-road path. So that's probably one of the most critical details. We're not pushing them into the middle of the roundabout to mix with general traffic. They get their own separate facility. Generally, when they cross the roundabout as well, they are awarded priority, meaning they don't have to slow down and give way to vehicles. It's the other way around. Vehicles have to slow down and give way to them. The way that this is generally facilitated is, so item number 1 here, we've got our bicycle crossing. You can see the cargo type bike there. So that's where the bicycle lane is. We've got number 2 here, which is the yield lines. We would call them give way line marking. Number 3 is bicycle stop or yield lines. This one's a little bit confusing because you would pick one or the other, either the cyclist yields or the motorist yields. So I wouldn't get too fussed about that one. Generally, you want to provide that continuity. So cyclists just travel straight through there and it's the motorists that are yielding. Number 4 is just got to do with the curb radius. Wouldn't be too fussed about that one either. Some degree of separation between pedestrians and cyclists. So similar to what I was saying at the intersections, if you are able to split up both pedestrians and cyclist movements at these locations, rather than just forcing them to share the environment, that would be considered best practice, and all associated signage as well. Now, because this is obviously taken out of the United States, North American jurisdiction, things look a little bit different to how we would do here, but the principles remain the same. Okay, we want to keep cyclists out of that circulating area. There are a few different ways, though, in terms of the configuration of a protected roundabout. So I did want to show some different layouts that you could think about, and kind of the pros and cons associated with that. So the first one that I've got, this is a real example, is once again in the Netherlands. And you can see here we've got the off-road bicycle facility well and truly away from the circulating area. Okay, I'll just draw an example and we'll just pretend like we're on the left-hand side here. If I was a cyclist wanting to turn right, there's a couple of ways I could do it, actually. If I was coming from the bottom here, I could follow the path around and go like that. This is also a bi-directional one, so I could potentially do something like this and follow along there. A few options for you there. The reason that we're so interested in providing this type of facility is not only getting cyclists out of the circulating area, but once again, where the conflict point exists, so I'll just look at that northern leg there. So say there's a vehicle exiting, just like this vehicle here, actually. If that vehicle is exiting and they are crossing here, where the conflict point is, it is at perpendicular. It's got that beautiful sight lines like we were discussing with protected intersections, which is a much, much better outcome. If cyclists are within the circulating area, where their conflict point is, it's directly adjacent to the traffic lane or where the vehicle is. So it's much more challenging to be able to see a cyclist within that space. I should also confirm there's no Wallies. I should have said that at the start. Sorry for those that are trying to work out where Wally is. No Wally in today's module. We've got an assignment instead. Sorry for those with the magnifying glass out. Here's how things look out on the ground. There's a very upset face looking at me. As I did mention, this one is a bi-directional facility, so it enables travel in both directions. And you can see how a vehicle that is exiting at this point here, there's clear signs there and, you know, line marking in place to acknowledge that they should be giving way to both pedestrians and cyclists within that space. So it's generally just done by the line marking. It's a little bit difficult to see on this angle, and there's also signage that is facing the motorist that we can't see. Ideally, what we would like to see, and we do see in other examples, is where we do have this conflict point, rather than just relying on signs and line markings and drivers picking up on those visual cues, having actual physical infrastructure to slow down motorists at the conflict point. So if we were able to raise this crossing point, that would be another significant win for cyclist safety. I've got a second example here of a protected roundabout. This one is in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And hopefully you can see how things have changed. The previous one had quite a large footprint, and the actual off-road bicycle facility was relatively well offset from the circulating area. This one is basically the smaller ring, which is the circulating area, a little bit of separation, which is just got these little channelized islands, and then another ring, the cyclists. So it's got the positive there of, in the previous example, we saw, and I think my markings are still up there, but that kind of right turn movement, because you've got these little funny detours, it's relatively circuitous. It's relatively far to ride just to do a right-hand turn. And also the kind of angles that you have to take to perform either left turns or right turns there for a cyclist means you have to slow down quite significantly, which is not a great outcome just for the continuity or for the comfort of cyclists. Because we've got a much smoother radius here for this example, you are able to maintain that continuity, that comfort for our cyclists. However, it does come with another consideration here, which, as mentioned previously with the protected intersections, and also just in the previous example, if you are able to provide greater offset to the crossing point, you are improving the ability to be able to sight cyclists or pedestrians that may be crossing at that location. So we'll have a look here what this actually looks like out on the ground. And just as a demonstration, I'm going to drive this little Porsche into the circulating area. Nothing against Porsche drivers, just happen to have that as a clip art. And let's just say, for instance, this Porsche wanted to exit the roundabout at this location, and this cyclist wanted to carry on through. Right? If you put yourself in the driver's seat of that Porsche, you could appreciate it would be very, very challenging to be able to see a cyclist that may be in that bicycle lane, that designated cycling facility. It's just very difficult to be able to spot them. They may be completely within the blind spot and hidden from your wing mirror or your rear mirror or anything like that. So this type of example where you've got a minimal offset from where the conflict point exists, where cyclists are crossing, and where the circulating area is, you do run into that risk of not providing the greatest sight lines there. Ken, any questions so far? You've been.
I wanted to let you have a little bit of a run presenting, but I've got many questions and
good
to come in.
Yeah.
So let's start. And quite a few of these actually, I think you cover off. So just let's jump them if we do. The crossing point and raising it is one people are quite interested in. Certainly the Victorian examples are raised. Do we get into that a bit?
Yes, we do. So we've got an example there to show why you would raise it, and show actually how that could be feasibly installed as well. It is possible, but the real benefit is you're not just relying on motorists to see, slow down, give way. There's cyclists, there's pedestrians. They could theoretically just drive straight through all of that. So rather than just rely on road user behavior, you're physically slowing them down through the use of vertical deflection.
Yeah, great. And some commentary around, some of the examples using the triangular approach give it a little bit of an impression of a raised treatment. It's not a raised treatment. That's a sort of European, and New Zealand actually uses a similar one as well. But that's fine.
Shark's tooth.
Another one I think you cover off is storage distance for between the vehicle, and you sort of were covering that before. Distance between the circulating carriageway and the crossing point, for whether that so that was one. Sorry, there's a few other things I wanted to cover off. Planter boxes and planting on the edge there, that to provide that separation. Is that a thing that's done?
So sorry, this planting here?
More in the next one up. The next little island where it's not planted at the moment.
That one?
Yeah.
Once again, you'd need to consider if that's going to grow too big and potentially impact on sightlines. Cyclists may be hidden by that. Generally, you can, concrete infills, probably more common, I would say. But we've got other examples you can have a look through, see what they're doing. Grass, I guess you could use. But then you've got the maintenance issue as well.
Yeah, let's have a look at some of the other examples. I mean, there's some good commentary in there. Some people questioning different bits about it. Interesting question around, what sort of size are we talking about? What's the smallest footprint we could do one of these in? But let's have a look at a few examples from around the world, and then we'll maybe come back to a few of these questions or comments people don't think that's been covered.
So just going back to the aerial, the first one was a larger footprint. I would say this is still a relatively large footprint as well, but you can certainly get things that are smaller. Just with regards to the storage issue as well, this is probably a good one to mention that. So you can see this white vehicle is beautifully illustrating a exiting motorist, and theoretically, they have to give way to any cyclists on that outer ring. So say if they were propped there and there's numerous cyclists riding around that ring, they could theoretically be storing there within the circulating area, potentially causing queuing issues, potentially causing rear-end crashes. Yes, those are risks that you need to consider as part of your design, but if you were comparing a rear-end crash with motor vehicles, those are likely very, very low severity, okay? People are getting up and walking away from those things, as opposed to a cyclist that is struck within a circulating area of a carriageway. Those are much more significant, much more severe. So if you compare the crash severity of those two crash types, that may then be able to influence your thinking about which kind of risks are of more concern for the project team. Right, I'll keep going. I've got another example here. This one is in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. It is Fendon Road, for those interested, Fenbon. Opened in July 2020. And this one is a little bit of a combination between the first and the second one that we looked at. So it's got a slightly larger footprint once again, but where the cyclists are riding, it's not directly adjacent to the circulating area. Instead, there is room for a little bit of that storage area. So once again, if a motorist was exiting at this location, you can see they have provided just a bit of extra space to clear the circulating area there. So you'd be looking at the 6 meter mark or something like that, just to give motorists some additional storage space there rather than holding up the entire roundabout. Same is obviously done on the approach there. So there's once again, if you were entering this roundabout, let's draw this from the other angle, you'd first be giving way to any pedestrians and any cyclists. So that's your cognitive load. You're thinking about vulnerable road users. You see you've got a gap, so you can pass, and then you can stop at the give way or the hold line there for the circulating area. So you don't have to think about pedestrians, cyclists, motorists all in the one kind of go. You've got this idea of, all right, I'm going to think of vulnerable road users. I've got a gap there, and I can then bring myself to the roundabout, and I can stall there and wait for a gap there as well. Question may have come in already about, is it common for motorists to, you know, bank up and just completely block all these crossings? Yes, that will certainly happen. But once again, it goes back to what are the crash risks that you're really talking about there? It's likely that cyclists will still be able to swerve around any of those backed up traffic, even if they are blocking, and same with pedestrians. Obviously, it's not ideal, but yeah, you've just got to kind of work within the existing space that you've got and try and deliver the best outcome. And sometimes not everything's going to work as exactly as you hope things will. But yeah, so this is just an example of kind of an amalgamation of that first one that we showed and the second one there. Here's what it looks like out on the ground, and hopefully this gives a bit of an illustration of what I was talking about, those sight lines, because this driver here is really trying to exit the roundabout, and it's very easy for them to be able to see cyclists that are crossing within that space. The closer that you bring that conflict point, the harder that it becomes. So this is a good outcome where you can see that that conflict point is nearly at perpendicular, where your sight lines are increased. I'll play this video and I'll check in with Ken. This is a protected intersection protected roundabout that is currently, you know, just working, and you can see all the different road users going about their day and just focus on different traffic movements and things like that. But Ken, is there anything that you'd like me to answer at this stage?
Yes. So there were some detailed questions around line marking different on the exit of the legs in the previous one, which I'm not sure exactly why they're slightly different there. There might be an on-site reason for that. There's sort of people just generally debating, okay, what traffic volumes are these not going to work? And you know, like that it would just congest up too much. I mean, I think that's always an interesting one, where if you let your sort of traffic volume dictate your form of intersection control, it's kind of, you should be letting your strategic transport objectives dictate that. And then you sort of accept that it's not going to work well for vehicles. That's what you accept. But if you're saying, no, it's a vehicle priority route, you're really pushing for vehicles to get through there, then you might be, in these positions. But you can, I think you can analyze it in Sidra if you need. So some of them, yeah, just debating on the storing over that that crossing point. I think there's a nice sort of smooth example you're showing here of how it all works, which is good. There was one from a previous now slide 15. I'm not sure exactly which one that was, but it's a question around why would you separate pedestrian crossing from the bike crossing. Seems like higher risk of queuing over each of these crossing points. And actually, I think you've got a photo coming up of the same one. Might even be the next slide, which sort of show. Well, it actually, yeah.
You've got a better memory than me.
No, yeah, I'm right. I'm wrong. Sorry. It's one slide back or two slides back where you just got that separation between the crossing point. It makes quite a wide area.
I think let's have a look at this video as it's going through, but see that bulk of cyclists on the left, if they were trying to cross at the same location as pedestrians, you can understand why they'd be incredibly uncomfortable, both for the cyclist and the pedestrian. So having those separate facilities, because they are, they've got different speeds, they've got different abilities, it's really nice to be able to provide two separate crossing spaces.
Signalised protected roundabouts.
Sorry, I missed that. I was just looking at your face. Looked like you had swallowed something sour.
No, well, it was more. I read the question and I went, "Ooh, this could be a long conversation." It was, would you consider signalised protected roundabouts to extend the life of the roundabout prior to going to traffic signals? Definitely, I would say, yeah. Signalizing roundabouts is I like it. It's a good thing because you keep the slowing and the better angle of crashes and everything like that. But it's a little context sensitive, isn't it? And strategic objective sensitive. But would it work signalizing this?
I'm not sure I've seen one in practice, but theoretically, I could see it working. Yeah.
Yep.
And to help manage those traffic flows, if you've got a dominant leg as well, just to be able to give a bit more access to the minor legs so they can safely access the roundabout as well.
Well, let's keep going and have a look at maybe hopefully some in Australia soon, just to give us that. Oh, here's one.
Here is one. So this is Melbourne's protected roundabouts. This is the before case. So not a great outcome for cyclists. What was occurring beforehand was just pavement marking, and pavement marking on the exterior or on the outside of the circulating area there, kind of forcing cyclists into that peripheral. I really don't like this type of design. I think that's a pretty poor outcome. This is what it looks like now. Okay, so this is a protected roundabout. And I might just go straight into a full screen version of it so you've got a bit more of an understanding. First thing you may notice is it's an octagon shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, octagon, that's right. So it's not that smooth circular shape. If you are able to provide that radius, that's a big win because it's a little bit nicer to ride when it's a smooth radius, but that's not what was achieved here. And it's got the similar design philosophies that we were talking about previously, which is we are not bringing cyclists into the circulating area. We're giving cyclists space off the road. Where they are crossing, they're crossing with priority. And this is an example where all of the conflict points are also raised. So at each of the legs, it's a raised crossing point. It's raised for the pedestrians, it's raised for the cyclists. And I will reiterate, the reason that we're doing that is to ensure that motorists are slowing down at that conflict point. And particularly as motorists exit roundabouts, They're much more inclined to have their foot on the accelerator and just start picking up speed. So if we can create this vertical deflection, ensuring that they are not traveling at that conflict point at speed, much more likely to be able to slow down and give way. And also the other benefit of having this raised crossing point is if you're a cyclist, you're riding at one level once again. So you're not forced to kind of go down via a curb ramp onto the carriageway and then back up or anything like that. It's all just one smooth level. Now, I did want to talk about a disadvantage of this type of roundabouts. Can anyone think of any disadvantages associated with this configuration? And I should also say with other configurations that were shown. I slightly alluded to it before, but I'd be interested to hear in the chat if you could think of anything that might tick off a cyclist.
While you're doing that, there's a question that's coming. Do you know of any data or any research was done around travel patterns around this, motorists avoiding the roundabout, taking alternate routes or anything like that?
So in our module 4 360-degree video, we do a little bit of a spiel about how this project got funded and the reason for it. One of the objectives of this project was to get motorists off this and onto the arterial. So I won't go into too much detail here because I would encourage you just to, don't want to repeat myself. You'll get that information in the module 4 360-degree video.
Okay, some answers to your question. Greater distance to travel, conflict with pedestrians, confident cyclists don't use it, high risk of rear end crashes, pedestrian comes in again. Yeah, it's a long route for the right turning cyclists, vehicles stored across crossing points, vehicle, so yeah, priority confusion possibly. Only one way for cyclists, they don't have the two-way, so they can't take a shorter route through. Vehicle could block cyclist paths. Priority isn't clear for peds and cyclists.
Right.
Fairly narrow cycle path. Yeah, there's a few.
The one that I was interested in, I think they're all very valid, but of particular note is that right turn movement. It is more circuitous if you are using the protected lane. So we'll give a prize out there, whoever said that one first, Ken. But just say you're a cyclist left of screen, you're using the protected facility, your right turn movement looks like that. Although it may seem minor from this aerial perspective, traditionally a cyclist, may have used that movement there.
We'll give it to Brenda. Articulated it quite well. And Steve already had a prize for today. So
congratulations. Well, it may seem like a fairly negligible distance difference there, and probably is. But cyclists, just like pedestrians, they'll pick the shortest path for themselves. So it can be a little bit of a nuisance having to travel out of your way just to do a little right turn there. So by no means do I suggest that is a failure of this project or anything like that. It's just the nature of we've got such a diverse level of skills and confidence levels of cyclists, and perhaps we're not always going to achieve 100% using a protected facility, and that's okay. And that is exactly what we're seeing within this photo here. So this cyclist here has chosen not to use the protected facility and is using just the general traffic lane and will then access the circulating area. The cyclist is also not wearing a helmet, but that's okay. We did get that question earlier, whether there was any trial or evaluation. And as Ken alluded to, we actually conducted the evaluation for this project. And we noticed that cyclists that were using the protected facility traveling through this roundabout was about 91%. So about 1 in 10 cyclists would choose to do what this gentleman is doing there and actually using the circulating facility. Whereas 91% are choosing the protected bicycle lane, the protected facility, which is the safer option. When we look at cyclists, though, that wanted to turn right, that statistic changed or decreased, and it went to about 77%. Okay, so 77% still chose to use the protected bicycle lane, whereas, if I get my maths right, 23% are choosing the circulating area. Once again, I don't think that these statistics show any failure on the project. I don't think it'd be reasonable to assume 100% compliance, because we don't get 100% compliance on any aspect of our road network. Instead, I think we really need to celebrate that we are providing safer roundabout and crossing opportunities for cyclists where previously cyclists may have chose not to cycle here at all because they felt uncomfortable using the previous typical arrangement there. So I just want to show you, this is what it kind of looks like out on the ground there. And if, as part of your project, you do think it is really critical that cyclists need to use the protected lane, so they shouldn't access the circulating area at all, rather than just using symbols and line stencils that is shown within these images, you could theoretically block off the access. So if you just extended that separator and forced, or, caroled, is that the word? Cajold? Like shifted them, cyclists, into that facility rather than give them the opportunity to enter the circulating area, you could also investigate that as a corrals. Thank you, Steve. That's the word I was looking for. Let's give a prize out to Steve there. And yeah, if it was determined that's really what you want to achieve, you want to achieve a much higher rate of cyclists using that facility, then by all means you could use infrastructure to help corral cyclists into that space. Okay, I might pause there, Ken, and have a mid-time break. Shall we say back here at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, let's do it. Back here at 11, and there were a couple of detailed questions around the design of it and a few other things, but let's take that break now.
Did you want to throw any questions at me?
Yeah, so if you go back one slide.
Yes.
So people are asking a few questions around the, so we've got the drainage grate there and the sort of bit there if a cyclist went into that. Can be a little bit of a common issue, I suppose, as we do some different infrastructure drainage designs. That, and also the drop off into the garden bed for potentially vehicles sweeping around there. So a little bit back from that.
This section?
Yeah. So any comments on either of those?
It's valid to pick up those things as risks. Certainly an errant cyclist, that would present itself as a snagging risk and could catch tires and result in cyclists falling off their bike or becoming destabilized. So I think it's valid to note that. Are you familiar with any actual design treatments there, Ken, to help mitigate that? We've got those two different levels.
Sorry, I was reading a question. Sorry, that one or the circulating
Well,
one?
the ACO drain thing there.
Yeah, I think there's sort of ramp grate things available, as Steve's pointing out, but I've never used one in particular in this situation. I think they're kind of like drivable culvert end walls, but for little ones. And the other one, there's been different things used to try to stop the swept path vehicle. One, bell bollards is a common UK one that's used, and a few other things. I was interested, Chris Davis has put in some good commentary around sort of raised treatments, and he's an appropriate expert to be talking about that, considering his ongoing work up in Mildura around compact or compact implanted roundabouts, cheap, low cost, but highly effective roundabouts to slow vehicles going into roundabouts to improve pedestrian cycle safety and the safety of all other users. So reach out to Chris Davis if anybody's sort of interested in some of those low cost roundabouts, and or get in contact with us and we'll put you in contact with Chris. He's done some pretty awesome stuff there. And presenting on one of his award-winning roundabouts at the College of Road Safety Conference in Cairns next week, if you're in the area.
Fabulous. Well, that'd be very exciting. Go, Chris.
All right, let's keep ticking along, because I think that amongst the wonderful conversation happening internally in the group there, I think we've covered off most things. We'll have some opportunity at the end for anything that's been missed.
All righty. Well, we'll move away from our protected roundabouts and have a discussion around other roundabout configurations. Similar to our conversation with the intersections, we saw protected intersections as best practice. We see protected roundabouts as best practice, but we do want to acknowledge other types of arrangements that may pop up along your network and how we can manage risks accordingly. So first, we've got this example here of a multi-lane roundabouts. These are significantly riskier for cyclists because you've almost doubled the exposure. Basically, there's more conflict possibilities, and sometimes, particularly when there's two left turn lanes or things like that, you can really have issues with masking and the dynamic visual obstruction that I also spoke about with your intersections. The leg that I'm going to focus on for here is on the right-hand side. So a cyclist may be riding along this path here, and then coming along here and doing a movement like this. Few things to note about this particular design is it starts off okay, because at least they are in a somewhat off-road position. You know, they're not just sharing the carriageway. They are elevated. They're on this concrete footpath, you could call it, I guess. However, just prior to the conflict point, they are taken down to carriageway level. Okay. You can also see that the bicycle lane narrows as it gets closer to the circulating area. So this is not a good example at all. I just wanted to show this as a risk for cyclists. There's nothing within the circulating area to suggest there's cyclists. There are these little random green conflict points there, but not at the conflict point. It just happens to be at the splitter islands there, which is a bit strange. And then cyclists are then again provided some type of facility off-road. If a cyclist wanted to turn right at this facility, their best bets, they may have to try and get into the right-hand traffic lane and just use that kind of movement there. Only really applicable for cyclists that are incredibly confident, because, this is a very dangerous maneuver to be taking, and you've got to really trust your skills and instincts to be able to pick that gap there. Otherwise, the cyclist could do, multiple stage crossing. So they could pause and wait there, pick a gap, go across there, stop again, go across there, and then ride up like that. But I will say in this particular example, there's no curb ramps at these locations to actually facilitate that. So a cyclist would have to either try and mountain bike up the curbs themselves or hop off their bicycle and walk across those sections. So in either example, not a great outcome for cyclists trying to turn right. And generally this roundabout is not comfortable at all for any of those cyclist movements. Here's what it looks like out on the ground. You can see a little bit clearer now how that bicycle lane is just getting narrowed as you're getting closer to that circulating area, which is kind of diminishes the effectiveness of having the bicycle lane there. You might have also noticed that there are some signals there. Unfortunately, that's got nothing to do with cycling infrastructure. That is got to do with these boom gates. There's a rail crossing just adjacent this roundabout, and those lights go on when the boom gates are down, just so there's no queuing effects or anything like that. So just in case you were wondering what they were doing there. So as I said, this one kind of demonstrates the issues that cyclists face with multi-lane roundabouts. And instead, we'll have a look at what could potentially be installed to help with cyclist movements at these locations. And the example that we will use is actually in Canberra. And once again, I'll start from the right-hand side where we've got an on-road bicycle lane, and it actually gets moved to an off-road facility. So that's already a big tick. We know that we like cyclists separated. We know we like them away from general traffic. So getting them away from general traffic is already looking positive. What's happening next is cyclists are getting taken away from the circulating area, similar to our protected roundabout. The difference here is priority is not awarded to cyclists. And if we have a look at, these roundabouts, multi-lane scenarios, generally they are on pretty significant traffic routes, right? That's why they're multi-lane, because they have a lot of traffic, and maybe the minor leg doesn't have such a significant traffic function, but in this instance, we'll just have to assume that it does. So priority is not awarded to cyclists. Instead, there's a little hold rail. You obviously cannot see it from this aerial, but an opportunity for cyclists just to pause, grab this little hold rail, check for any oncoming traffic, and then when they've got the gap, cross over. If they wanted to turn right here, they could pause again. There's a hold rail there and cross over. Much better example of how to deal with cyclists at multi-lane roundabouts, basically acknowledging that, it's really not safe to be in the circulating area. We want you to cross away from that circulating area, away from the traffic stream. And we can't afford to give you priority here because we've designated that these are traffic priority routes. So you're just going to have to slow down and give way. Obviously, perfect world, we'd be able to maintain cyclist connectivity the whole way through. We'd be able to do something like grade separation going above or underneath or something like that. I could imagine the Dutch looking at this particular example and think that is absolutely terrible. Like they just couldn't fathom having that as a possible treatment solution. But we acknowledge that, you know, we're still within a developing space and we don't necessarily have the funding just to be able to grade separate at each of these type of arrangements. So instead we need to try to get a step towards something that's a little bit better and a little bit safer for cyclists. Once again, this is just a look how this site looks on the ground in Canberra. Cyclists being corralled there to use the off-road path. Once again, it's not really stopping cyclists from just using the circulating area. I don't see that as a particularly bad thing because, in my opinion, cyclists using this route already would likely be quite comfortable, just given the previous section, which is all an on-road in a multi-lane environment with the speed here is 60 kilometers per hour. So they've likely already got some level of confidence. So giving them that opportunity to, you know, if they feel like there's space and they feel comfortable in doing so, they can use the circulating area. I'm not necessarily against that. Any questions so far on the multi-lane roundabouts, Ken?
I'm just reading one here from Todd. Austroads provide guidance on providing a minimum offset from the crossing for off-ramps for cyclists. Do you know why no separation has been provided for a number of examples? Is there guidance on when providing the off-ramp close to or at the crossing location, as it can create more risk?
So is this, the offset from the off-road bicycle lane to the carriageway there? At distance?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. I'd certainly agree. There's definitely looks like there's opportunity and existing road reserve width to have brought the bicycle path further closer to the property boundary.
Go back some examples. I think there's some.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's. Yeah, no, those were your other ones. Okay, let's keep ticking on.
I was also just going to add one of the things. So yeah, Austroads does specify, you know, how far we should bring this crossing point. We talked about if it's too close, then we're really having a difficult time for exiting vehicles to be able to see a cyclist. If we bring it too far, we've got two kind of issues there. One is cyclists can't be bothered riding that detour. It's too far for them. You know, it's out of their way just to cross over the carriageway. The other is motorists will be picking up speed. Okay, the further that you put that away, the faster that they will be traveling. So the roundabout will do some, will have some effect of actually shaving off the operating speed. Multi-lane roundabouts not as effective as single lane, but generally you'll get some reduction in the operating speed. The further you push back that crossing point, the more likely it is that motorists will be putting their foot back on the accelerator and gaining that speed back. So you don't want it too far away for those two reasons. Some of you may have seen this within your career, this particular figure that was within the Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 4B. It has been superseded. So just in case you've got any of those hard copies lying around the office or anything like that. But Austroads, they used to say, let's do a bicycle lane in the periphery of multi-lane roundabouts. That is no longer the case. Instead, they are saying what was shown before of let's try and bring an off-road facility and let's get cyclists crossing at defined crossing points. And, you know, if it was possible, give them priority, but in all likelihood, it wouldn't be, and giving general traffic priority. So just wanted to make sure that no one has still got that example floating around in their offices, because we're no longer recommending cyclists take that periphery spot within the roundabout. Here's an interesting example of how the actual crossing configuration may be dependent upon what that road's function is. But so for those that have done any movement in place classification or is aware of that framework, you've got this idea of, you know, different roads have different movement tiers, I suppose you could say, or the, you know, different level of importance. If it's a freight network or it's a primary transport corridor, that would have a very, very high movement function. It's very important to get all of that traffic through there, as opposed to a local road that's really only servicing residents or anything like that. That would have a very low movement function. It's not as important to get, you know, rafts of vehicles through there. Instead, you've got to be, yeah, it's just not as significant as a consideration. And this can then play out on how your crossing facility may look. So as an example, if I looked at the east-west or my connection from left to right here, this is multi-lane. And to me, automatically, because I'm seeing this giant, you know, median reserve there as well, I'm thinking that's a motorway. Like that looks like a very strategically important route. Okay. This is just my assumptions, of course. The north-south legs, I don't know much information about them. All I can see is they've got one stand-up lane there, and perhaps they do not have that same level of movement function. Okay. They're not as strategically important as strategically important. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because that has also influenced how the design has chosen to, you know, develop those crossing facilities. So if we look at cyclists crossing over this motorway, there's no priority there. Cyclists are forced to slow, they give way, they pick their gap. The priority is to general traffic. So that kind of meets the demands of that priority route for general traffic. Conversely, these legs that I've nominated are local roads and they don't have that movement function. Pedestrians and cyclists do have priority against them. Okay, so instead, it's been determined that, you know, cyclists can ride straight on through here and they've got priority as opposed to general traffic. Really, really cool way to show how that movement in place thinking can actually impact upon your design. And also, let's just say that the east-west connection is also the prevalent leg for cyclists as well. So cyclists want to travel through here. That's the most important journey for them. That journey is also prioritized for them, which I think is really cool. So you've got that kind of element working for them as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of comments. And sorry, I see Lockie posted something to host some panelists, and then I replied to everybody. So some people might be a bit confused about what like Lockie can have a price. He was spotted the use of the term mammal in that actual design, which I can tell you the background on it. It's a bit like one of our designers was mocking this up for a particular route, which has quite a few training cyclists, and I think it was just a bit of a Reese special where he's very much somebody who would use the term mammal, being middle-aged men in lycra. It is very much a training route and trying to what would encourage a training cyclist to actually separate out there. And the debate was as to whether this would, or it would still just use the circulating carriageway. And I'll let you make your own calls on that. So good spotting there. Question around whether a turbo roundabout would be safer for cyclists. I'm not aware of any research on that particularly. I don't think it would. And I certainly, like in the Netherlands, for example, they do a lot of, well, they've got quite a few turbo roundabouts, and they wouldn't ever mix cyclists in with that circulating carriageway. And you kind of even narrow it down so there's not, yeah, I don't feel it would be and safer for cyclists. It's better for vehicle to vehicle. and potentially for motorcyclists as well, but unsure about how it would go for cyclists. I think, yeah. And then actually Murray had in the Q&A used the term mammal as well. Mammal patching, which I hadn't heard of it as that term, for just painting green through areas. Which I think is an interesting term. Okay, let's keep going, and I'll see if any others come in. Oh, there might be a few others. Let me read them. You keep going.
No worries. So I do want to move on to our next topic, which is local roundabouts. And it is that time of day again where I get to ask for the final time, what is wrong with this photo? So it's our final confused cyclist there, and we might just get rid of her. There we go. Any ideas what is wrong with this photo? What stands out to you? I'll give you a moment to have a think about that. And also, let's give out some trivia. Does anyone know where this roundabout is?
Sam does. Answered it before you even asked it.
Oh, really?
Yep. It's in Launceston. That is correct.
It is the Peanut Roundabouts in Launceston, Elfin Road, Brisbane Street, Lawrence Street.
Yep. Okay, well, we're seeing no shallow cyclist lane, just ends at the curb. Cyclists force into the through lane, end of bike path, a lot of that. No transition to cyclist abrupt end. Door or zone on the other side there. Show lots of those. No Wally signs. Yeah, I think that's mainly it. Sight lines to motorcyclists. But yeah, no, I think that covers off quite a few.
Absolutely. It's a super busy roundabout as well. There's lots of traffic that goes through here. But yeah, the bicycle lane ends with no provision whatsoever leading up to the roundabout or within the roundabout. You can't see that obviously at this stage, but yeah, that's a pretty significant concern. And always like to tie it back to, general traffic. Imagine just having traffic lane ends and then that's it. That's all you do. It's would not be at all considered appropriate and would be quickly, investigated and engineered. So we shouldn't be doing the same for cyclists. So we need to think about, well, where do cyclists want to go? Where do they want to position themselves? Can we look at, potentially getting cyclists off the road there, providing them some kind of off-road path? If that's not achievable, are we able to bring them into a more central position through the use of sharrows so they can actually claim the traffic lane? So those are the kind of options that you would be looking at within local roundabouts. Okay, so you're talking lower speeds here. Now, here is an example of, an on-road facility that rather than just ending as it's approaching the roundabout, instead there is a sharrow to suggest that, okay, you can now, as cyclists, claim the traffic lane and ride in the middle there. I've got to say that's probably the most common way that any cycling intervention is implemented at roundabouts, is just through the use of these sharrows. Just a reminder for those that forgot what the sharrows are, the shared arrows there, just those little pavement markers there. I'm actually more of a fan where the sharrow is combined with a local area traffic management treatment or a speed hump, as is shown in this example. Preferably, I certainly prefer to see the treatment installed prior to where the conflict point is. So you've kind of got cyclists that are merging at this point. Ideally, you'd slow vehicles down prior to where that conflict point exists and then travel on through there. I just think that's a
If-
sensible way to do things. So
If you go back one, I mean, that's a perfect opportunity for a speed cushion right at the front of that, just right in front of us there. Yeah,
absolutely
beautiful. Like and you put one on the other side as well, so people don't go around it. But just wonderful because it slows the vehicle right. If there's any confusion as to who, is the cyclist going to go first, it clarifies all of that. So it's not nowhere near as good as those protected roundabouts, but the cost of the protected roundabout and the size, the land take and everything like that is a challenge often. You can get some pretty good results from a safety perspective with this sort of stuff. And you can let your 8-year-old or 10-year-old claim the lane over a 4-wheel drive? Well, probably not. So we're not quite getting to the objectives we want, but as a low-cost interim treatment, I think it's something.
No, beautifully said there, Ken. So if we can get that treatment prior to the merge point, that's certainly a better outcome there. And just another example here of that shown where instead of just a single speed cushion or something like that, even having something that's more elongated across the entire carriageway width. And once again, if you're able to put that prior to any of the merge points, that would be a better outcome. I've got a few slides here just regarding some educational pieces, things that have popped up over the years across different jurisdictions that I think can be used to help have conversations with community, remind them about the vulnerability of cyclists. So moving a little bit away from the infrastructure side of things, but I think it's also an important conversation to have, and know that other jurisdictions are having these conversations as well with their constituents, with their community, and how they're kind of managing that. One of the adverts here is from California, obviously looking out for cyclists and having a dedicated bicycle safety month. So they regularly do different adverts and have those situated around, around the town and posted on bus shelters and things like that. While I go through these little adverts and just talk a little bit anecdotally over the next couple minutes, I might get Marissa just to launch a poll where we can have another quick reflection on your skills that you've picked up over the course of our modules.
Sorry, Marissa's dropped out and it's come down to me. So I'm going to hit launch.
It's launched.
Well done. Fingers crossed it's worked. So look at that.
Very good. So the question that we asked at the start, how would you rate your level of cycling infrastructure knowledge? We just wanted you to take a moment to reflect on that now that we've ended this course. And I'm just going to keep chatting through some of the educational pieces that we've seen. A few years ago, there was this Twitter, or now it's called X, kind of viral thing going around where cyclists or the community would be putting little red cups at the edge of their bicycle lane. And then a few hours later, they would show how quickly those cups get destroyed, indicating, motorists are regularly entering the bicycle lane, and also demonstrating how vulnerable cyclists are because things are getting actually crushed and destroyed. And they were demanding more protected bicycle lanes, separated infrastructure, off-road paths. We can't just be accepting that a painted line is going to protect us. So I think that's a really, really good idea. This did go global. We did have examples of this in Australia, in New Zealand, in Asia, where they had similar red cup projects. So if you've got time over lunch, feel free to search that hashtag if you're interested. This was a fellow in New York who I thought was quite funny, who was advocating for protected bicycle lanes along their commute to work, and the local road authority kept knocking it back. So he decided to put things into his own hands and went to the local hardware store and bought 100 plungers and some nice epoxy glue and just made his own protected bicycle lane. So that's pretty impressive. Bit of vigilante justice there. Unfortunately, it did not last, and council did decide to rip that up. And also, unfortunately, there's, to my knowledge, still no protected bicycle lane there. So certainly a community member wanted to put something into their own hands there, and yeah, tried to improve the safety, but didn't get the tick of approval from the road authority there. The last one I just wanted to share was, this is an advert in Scotland, which was See Cyclist, Think Horse. There's the link to watch the video, so feel free to watch that over lunch today. This one did come with a bit of backlash. It only lasted about 6 months or something on the television before the community were in uproar and said it has to be taken off. The few things upsetting the Scottish folk. One was, this woman was riding without a helmet, which is not a legal requirement within the UK, but it was still seen as a poor optic. And the other one was that this cyclist should have been riding closer to the curb there. She was a bit too relaxed, and people were just furious about that and didn't want to see that on their screen. So it didn't last too long, but I think it's another good campaign just to demonstrate that, yeah, well, you can watch the ad yourself and perhaps you'll glean the issues raised there. We'll get into the conversation now around your assignment and what remains to complete the course. So there is a final 360-degree video that will get you to watch. It's hosted on the LMS. You will get to experience what it feels like riding through Melbourne's protected roundabout. And in example 2, you'll get to see what it feels like riding within the circulating area, where you've just got the little bicycle lane in the periphery. So example 2 is not at all what we would consider best practice. And it's, if you watch the video and you have a look behind you, you can see just how uncomfortable it is when you've got a vehicle right there and you're trying to turn right and they're trying to go through, and there's just this really awkward stage of, are they going to just drive over me kind of thing. So really, really good example of why we are not recommending those periphery bike lanes within that 360-degree video. But I will share my screen so we can all have a look at the final LMS that we'll be getting you to do. So under module 4, we've got the module 4 assignment. So we can click on that one there. And there is a Word document. I've already got this open, so I'm not going to click on it again. And I'll also just go back there. And in module 4, there's another document there, which is Letter to LGA's Template, Cycling Infrastructure Safety Risk. I'll have a chat about that one as well. So there's 2 Word documents. I've got them both open. The first one I'll open is our module 4 assignment. So once again, I'll just run you through all these steps. The reason I'm doing this so analytically, or just making sure that everyone understands, is because, you know, we just want to make sure that you've got all the information, you're comfortable with the assignment, and we're not in turn getting any assignments that are not clearly meeting the criteria that we require to see as people marking this. So we're actually going to get you to visit a site. Step 1, select the site that has existing cycling facilities. You can pick a site that is convenient for you, okay? If you are dropping your kids off to sport this weekend and you happen to notice a bike lane, it's on the road, that's fine. You can use that. If there's a bike facility outside your office, you want to use that, go for it. We don't want you going out of your way. We also don't want you putting yourself in harm's way. So please don't pick something that's difficult to get to, or, you know, adjacent fast moving traffic or anything like that. Just pick something that's convenient and safe to access. There is a step 1A here. So this is where things, you've got those slightly different avenues that you could be taking, and it's only applicable if you're within the state of Victoria. If you are Victoria, or you're going to pick a site in Victoria, review bike spots. So I'll open up what that is. This is a sharing platform that was launched back in 2020 by the Amy Gillett Foundation. And it was a way for cyclists to say, here's some areas that I really like, and here's areas that I do not like. Okay. I'm going to just zoom in on a site near to me. I live in Frankston, for those that do not know. And say the site that I picked was this one here, Nepean Highway and Fletcher Road. That's the site that I picked. I could click on this and see what someone has said about this. And it says, oh, this is actually a really good example. They've given us a bit of a description there. So they've said what they're concerned about, and I can use that information to then influence what I will produce as part of this assignment. So this is only applicable for those in Victoria because this study or this platform was only within Victoria. So apologies for your other states and territories. There was some I noticed in Canberra, I think it was. Yeah, there's a few sites there in Canberra. So if you've got a site in Canberra, feel free to use those ones. But you certainly don't have to pick a site that has, you know, both this information and is convenient. Focus also on something that is convenient. If it happens to have this information, then have a flick through there. That's my advice.
Or Max, you could select your spot based on that data.
Absolutely.
If you want to dive in and have a look where there's clusters of people unhappy with the infrastructure, and then you could go and have a look at it.
That's another great method. That's right. So perhaps you start with bike spot, look for those heat spots, those real clusters, and be like, oh yeah, that's pretty convenient for me. I'll go out there and have a look at that. And you've got all that material already from the cycling community saying, this is what I do or do not like about this location. So it's used for that purpose. Step 2, we want you to visit the site. We want you to take a photo of it. We want you to see the bicycle lane in the flesh, or the bicycle facility in the flesh. The reason being, Street View doesn't always give you the full perspective. You don't necessarily have to ride through it. I appreciate not everyone here would feel comfortable doing that, but we would like you to actually go out and visit it. Bonus points if you take a selfie. We love a selfie, don't we, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah. Answer the questions below. So we've got just some few questions, and importantly, we want you to answer them in a way that you find the most interesting. Okay, so you can answer it in any way that you want. Previously, we've had people make videos, had people do comics, we've had people write poetry, someone wrote a song. We've had people involve their family, so that's been like a little group exercise. The reason we encourage this creativity is because some people really like to use that as a, you know, just a creative output for them. If you've got that flair within you, we're all encouraging it. Just go for it. If you want to do a design using MicroStation or AutoCAD, because that's something that you're interested in learning, go for it. You know, we're all about that. So want to offer you that opportunity. If you're feeling creative, please go for it. In saying that, if you want to just answer these questions in a Word format and just pop in the answers, that's also completely fine. You're not actually marked on your creativity. We're just giving you that opportunity if you are so inclined. Step 4 is save and upload whatever assignments that you have offered onto the learning management system. So you would have already done that with the module 2 assignment. Same idea. You're going to click upload that file, whether it's a Word document, a movie, you know, audio file. We've had a TikTok. We had a few TikToks. I forgot about those ones. They were good. Whatever you like, that's fine. The questions that we want you to directly answer are, what infrastructure currently exists? You'll be marked there on using the correct terminology. Okay, so make sure you've got that down pat. What are the hazards for cyclists? We want you to be able to identify what are the risks associated with that particular infrastructure for cyclists. Okay. You don't need to list out 100 risks. Think about the most pertinent, the most important that you think are relevant to cyclists. Then we want you to get your solutions hat on and think what could be installed to better improve safety for cyclists. So think of this as an entire blank sheet. You know, you've got the ability to really reconfigure that particular cycling facility. What would you do to change that environment and make it safer for cyclists? I will, try and keep things within reason. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not giving you a budget or anything like that. But if you're going to suggest, let's just ban all vehicles on this motorway and make it only cyclists, yes, that would make it safer for cyclists, but I'm not really sure that would be very pragmatic or achievable. So you probably won't get full marks for that question. So those are the 3 questions that we need to see answered. The way that you answer them is completely up to you. Now, this pink line here is optional. So it's only for those that want to explore all of this learning and help share it with those who are in a position to perhaps use that information. And we've given you a template for a letter that you could send to your local government area that perhaps manages that part of the network. It could also be sent to the state network authority. It could be sent to a local MP if that was your decision. But we've given you this template and I'll get the template open, that says, I've recently completed this training course. As part of this course, I inspected a section of Frankston City Council's cycling network. The site that I assessed was Nepean Highway and Fletcher Road. So obviously those pink highlighted sections are what you'd be filling in. I wish to alert Council to the following design features that increase the risk of cyclist crashes. So everything that you put in your assignment, you can just jot down there as dot points. I'm worried about the speed there. I'm worried about the sight lines. I'm worried that there's no separation, whatever it is. I recommend that Council looks at the following treatments that could be implemented at this site to improve safety for cyclists. Once again, you could do this, you could do that, etc. If you did happen to be within Victoria and you found similar concerns from the cycling community in the bike spot survey, you can include that as a link as well, and then just signing that one off. And we do ask, if you are going to be sending this off to whoever it is, if you could either CC us at training at safesystemsolutions.com.au, just so we've got a bit of a record of any participants that may be going this extra step to try and alert those authorities that there are inadequacies on the network, and they're really trying to mitigate those risks. Ken, how did all of that sound? I appreciate there's lots of information there. So that's the reason I wanted to go through it and explore it in detail, but hopefully that was clear for everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you. There's a bit there. So there's a couple of questions are coming around the actual assignment. One being maybe a little bit of confusion as to what you mean by facility. So somebody's saying there's not many good cycling facilities around them. So can they use an off-road path? Well, I think just a road without facilities, like without cycling infrastructure, is a good one to look at as well, because it's got the deficiencies there. So don't be constrained by looking for specific cycling stuff. It could be a lack of it is a big issue. There's a road or a street or the like that doesn't have what it should, but you can go to off-road facilities if you want. When's the due date?
That is a good question. I will double check. We have got the due date as next Friday the 22nd.
Yeah. And yeah, hopefully it shouldn't take you too long, this whole exercise. But it is good to sort of consolidate a bit of it, have a bit of a focus on a specific bit of infrastructure around your house or around your area there. So people asking when bike spots going to be set up, and Sam rejoicing that he can send himself a letter. which may be the case for some people here.
That's true.
I'll share my screen and jump into the learning management system, Max, if you don't mind, just to cover off how people end the course, unless you wanted to do that.
Nah, go for it. Thanks, Ken. I was just about to jump in, but you do it.
Okay. So hopefully you're seeing that.
Yep.
Yeah, so you've got all of your modules, and if you haven't yet done the quizzes for all the modules, make sure you get in, do a quiz. There's always this little indicator if it's a task and it doesn't have a tick next to it, you know it's something you should have done. So make sure you complete all of those. And then when they're all finished and you've uploaded your assignment and you've got the confirmation on that you've achieved what's required, you go into this final bit, feedback and certificates, and you'll have to just do I think it's a 3-question feedback form, very quick feedback form, and then a few things will release. Your certificate will release, but then some collateral or some stuff if you wanted to use any of it to share your achievement online. So you could use the certificate, or there'll be a few more of these badges that'll be in there in a second. So there's one of them. Hopefully you're seeing that. So you could post that online if you wanted, or you could use your own words, of course, and your certificate or whatever else you want. We'll put a couple more of these badges so you got some stuff to choose from. But we really encourage you to promote this course to others as well. We often have, as is the way, the first course gets people who are reasonably skilled up in cycling infrastructure, and we've seen that come through with this group. Great knowledge, passion for riding, passion for creating sustainable transport networks and encouraging more people to use active modes and the like. We really want to start getting some people who maybe aren't currently as enthusiastic, as skilled up and as knowledgeable. So we really want to empower this group to encourage others to come along. Let's get some of those people early in their career along so that they get a foundation of thinking about all wonderful cycling infrastructure throughout their career. Let's try and get it out there wide. So we'll ask you to share the information about all these upcoming courses. And it's a really good initiative that the federal government is supporting, and Amy Gillett Foundation is leading, and Safe System Solutions are deploying. So thanks to Max for all his wonderful information and guidance there. Of course, Max is available to contact at any point there if you've got questions about the assignment, or if you want to ask about specific cycling treatments, or even just ask if we know of any work or we've done any work in particular areas. We're happy to always to share stuff if we can help get safer cycling infrastructure in across Australia. Thanks to Marissa and the organising team behind the scenes who sent you out packs, and we'll send you out prizes, and just make sure everybody's ticking along. You'll probably get an email later in the next week or so, just reminding you to finish off the assignment if you haven't, and reminding you to just do the feedback form and those sort of things, and post anything online. But otherwise, Max, back to you for a final closing.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to share one more thing, and then I promise I'll let everyone go. But in the I'll go back to the start, sorry. Under resources, reference document and resources, we also provided this one little last cool thing, which is cycling 360 footage examples. For those that have seen all the 360 videos so far, we wanted to just create this little library for all of you to be able to access. So if ever down the track you need to be like, what's a protected bicycle lane again, or a bi-directional bicycle lane, you can click on this video here and it'll take you to a 360-degree video, so you can see exactly what that looks like. I'll pause the video there, sorry. And we also just created these little legends here of emojis so you can see what we would consider best practice or what it could be improved. And also this one here, which is a please no, please don't do that at all. So another one just to save to your local hard drive, and just in case you forget any of these terms, it's probably a good reference for you there. But you've been a wonderful group. We're excited to see those Module 4 assignments come through, excited to see what you come up with, and thank you for all the information that's come through so far and all your collaboration. It's great to see, hear from your own examples and everything like that. And yeah, look forward to seeing this this group go forward with your new cycling infrastructure knowledge.
Just a final question coming around the assignment 2, and when results from that will be back. They're coming in.
Apologies. We will be getting onto that. Certainly early next week. We've just been a bit flat out with lots of other tasks at the moment. But yes, if you haven't received your feedback for module 2, that it's certainly coming.
And don't get overwhelmed by this final assignment in terms of, Max has mentioned your terminology and stuff like that. Have a go at it, you should be able to get through and get that pass mark, and we'll give you a little bit of feedback if needed. Of course, you can always resubmit if you want to. But thank you again. Thanks, everybody. Let's get lots of safe cycling infrastructure out there, get more people riding, and when they do, let's make sure they do it safely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everyone. Farewell.
Bye.